Welcome to the Performance Enhancing Podcast. It's like steroids for your brain. A podcast for people looking to live life at their peak potential, chock full of real-world tools and knowledge that you can apply in your life today. By providing you with a lens into the lives, beliefs, practices, and actions of those who are already living extraordinary lives, the Performance Enhancing Podcast will help you shift your mindset or create that change in your daily rituals and habits so you can explode with success in the areas of life that are most important to you. So get ready for another dose of Performance Enhancing Podcast with SatoriPrime. Here's your host, Ilan Ferdman.
Hello, my friend, and welcome back to another Performance Enhancing Podcast with your host, Ilan Ferdman. So I've gotten some incredible feedback off of this Wayne Dyer tribute. A lot of you have been writing me emails specifically about the Shia story one, where you teared up. I actually asked Emily, who puts these episodes together, if I should put a warning in the podcast, and she replied no, because otherwise people will get defensive and kind of put up their shield, and it's better to just experience it as is, which I completely agree with. So for any of you, those that did not expect to cry, my apologies, or not really my apologies, because everyone that I've spoken to that has just said it was the most incredible experience and incredible story. And yeah, it just really, really moves me, and it gets me every single time. Again, that's why my son's called Shia, and I know I got a lot of feedback off the first two, but I just want to read one. This email came from Troy Ellis, who's been listening to this podcast or Pep Talks for a long time. And honestly, Troy, if you're listening, this is probably the greatest compliment I've ever received in my entire life. And I was just so moved by it. I shared it with my friends and family because I couldn't believe that there was someone out there in the world that views what we've been doing here in this type of way. So Troy wrote, "Hey, Ilan, I hope you're well. I cried so much from your first reading. You're an amazing person. I changed my job now because of you. I'm closer to family, more money, and less stress. I've changed how I talk to my kids and how to hear them. You are my Wayne Dyer. So thank you. You have changed the life of every single person I touch. I wish you every success. Thanks, Troy Ellis." To even be named in the same breath as someone like Wayne Dyer is, I think, my lifelong mission. And the fact that there's someone out there in the world that sees what it is that we're doing here as that influential was just, it rocked. I still read it, and I actually don't quite comprehend that there is something like that out there in the world. So Troy, truly from the bottom of my heart, and everyone else that responded, just because I didn't read yours didn't mean I wasn't moved by it. This was just something that was beyond words for me. So thank you so much. So today I want to continue with this theme because there's at least 3 other lessons that I really want to share with you. I'm interviewing a few other people, and there might be a couple others that I'll throw in there. But today what I want to talk about is the concept of forgiveness. And forgiveness is something that Wayne Dyer speaks about a lot, but also shares an incredibly powerful and beautiful story having to do with his father. So I'm going to actually let Wayne share the story with you. And as you listen to this, I want you to pay attention to a few things. First and foremost, obviously the power of forgiveness, which we'll talk about after. But secondly, I want you to start listening to the synchronicity of what the universe or God put in Wayne's place in order to have him get to that one moment in life. Okay? So I'm not going to say any more. Let's just listen to Wayne tell his version of the story, and we'll continue and talk a little bit after.
It's so interesting what you were talking about. Your father was watching back there, and you're thinking about other people, that we have something bigger in our lives that we're all connected to. There is a source of some kind that is moving the pieces around, as you said. My own father walked out on our family when I was just a little boy. My mom had 3 little boys by the time she was only 22 years old, all under the age of 4, and he just disappeared and he left. And I grew up hating this man. I mean, I had so much anger toward him, and he married 5 additional women, and he died of cirrhosis of the liver. He was an alcoholic and so on. But it's interesting, many years later, when I kept trying to find him, and I used to be so angry at him, and I'd wake up every morning and I'd be just sweating, and I'd have dreams about him and fighting him and all of this kind of thing. And it was 1974, I found out that he had been dead 10 years, and I didn't even know it. And through a series of the most mysterious kinds of things, I rented a car. I found out that he was buried in Biloxi, Mississippi. The car that I rented didn't have a seatbelt on it, so I reached in and there was a little card inside the seatbelt, and it said, Candlelight Inn, Biloxi, Mississippi. And I was heading down to Biloxi where I was going. I put the card in my pocket, and I drove down to Biloxi from Columbus, Mississippi, where I was doing a little bit of work. And I arrived at the outskirts of the city, and I went to find out where my father was buried. There were 3 cemeteries in Biloxi. So I called the first one, there was no answer. I called the second one, that was busy. The third one was this tiny little listing, and I called, and this man came on after a long time, and I said, my father's name was Melvin Lyle Dyer. He died in 1964, 10 years ago. I just wanted to find my father. He went away for the longest time, and he said, yes, he said, your father's buried here. And it was like the end of a dream for me. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, how do I get to the cemetery? And he said, your father isn't really buried in a cemetery. He's buried on the grounds of the Candlelight Inn. And I reached into this cart that was in the rental car that I had rented, and on the back of it there was a map on how to get there. And I went to my father's grave, and I stood there for 3 hours. It was the 24th of August, it was 1964. And what I did in those 3 hours is I was angry at him, I stomped on him, I had other things I wanted to do on his grave. And finally, the last few minutes when I was there, something came over me, and I said, from this moment on, I send you love, and I forgive you for everything that you've done. And when I walked away from there, it was like everything in my life changed. I was overweight at the time, I was drinking at the time, I was in a very bad relationship, my writing wasn't doing the things that I wanted it to do.
Was it the resentment? But what do you think happened in that moment?
Forgiveness, Mark Twain said, forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. And I felt like my whole life totally turned around when I got rid of the anger and the resentment and the hatred. When you carry that stuff around,
it's exhausting.
Yeah, there's a Chinese proverb that says if you're going to pursue revenge, you'd better dig 2 graves, because it's going to kill you.
Yeah, you
and so my
yourself.
father, the person who walked out on me when I was just an infant and walked out on my mother and forced my mother to put her children into foster homes and so on, he was perhaps the most influential person in my life, because it was through the act of forgiveness that my whole career took off. I wrote Erroneous Owns, and 14 days after that, it became a worldwide bestseller, and everything in my life changed. I stopped drinking, I got myself back into shape, I started attracting the right people into my life. Everything changed just through the act of forgiveness. So your father had one impact, and my father, whom I've never even met, had another.
Yeah, I think when we take a moment to take a deep breath and say there must be a reason, like there must be a reason for your father to become who he was. Who knows what happened to him?
Yeah. And I still, despite, I say to my mother, I said, have you forgiven him? She said, look, you weren't married to the bastard, I
was. So minus that final ending, which also has a really clever point with his mom, there's some really incredible highlights. So like I said before, there's synchronicity. The universe, God is always trying to lead us down a path. Most of the time, we're super resistant to following that because it doesn't seem like it would make sense, or it doesn't seem logical, or it seems like it would be a waste of time, or whatever the justification, right? But this man ends up going to Biloxi, gets in a new rental car, and because the seatbelt latch isn't exposed, and meanwhile seatbelts had just been put into effect, he ends up lifting the seat panel to find the seatbelt, and in the seatbelt buckle is this card for the Candlelight Inn. Thinks nothing of it, puts it in his pocket. Starts calling these places, and the gentleman tells him that his father's actually buried at Candlelight Inn. If that's not the time where you just hear like that music, it's just incredible to me how, I've called them before, and I call them guiding lights. these little tea lights across a path that kind of one leads to the other. And if you just have the vision to see it, it's almost like someone telling you, yes, you're on the right path, keep going. And this is true for, certain people coming into your life, certain events showing up, books, seminar, whatever, always showing themselves to you at the right time. So that I thought was incredible in that story. The second piece that I find to be incredible is Wayne Dyer, at that point, I guess he wasn't so spiritually inclined, but on a journey nonetheless, and sees his father and just wants to, he didn't say it in this version, but I've heard it in other versions where originally he wanted to go there just to piss on this man's grave. So he stomped, he cursed, and he did this for 3 straight hours. And I'm not telling you this because that's wrong. That's the process he needed to go through to get to the end. Sometimes we don't allow ourselves to feel mad, angry, frustrated. We just don't because we think it's wrong. And there's nothing wrong with it. If the intention behind it is to get to the other side of something, if the intention is I'm going to get mad, angry just to harm people, just to annoy people, or just to hurt myself, I don't believe that that's a great action to take. But that's the way we generally function on autopilot. What he went here to do is he went to have some sort of experience with his father. So after it's all said and done, once he got all the anger out, because sometimes, 2 things can't occupy the same space at the same time. So he had to actually remove that anger. And by stomping his feet and cursing and doing all that stuff, he actually moved that rock, moved that boulder, if you will. And what was there afterwards is space, empty space. And in that empty space, you can call it God, you can call it universe, you can call it whatever. Something came over him and had him realize that this man has been ruling his life without even being in it for decades. And the only way, this kind of follows up on what we spoke about last time in the last episode, right? When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. He decided to give this man love. He decided to offer this man forgiveness. And not as just this surface, I forgive you thing, but to actually release all the hatred, release all the victimhood based on this man, and truly forgive him, truly offer this man love. And what he didn't speak about in this particular video, but I've heard him say before, is you don't know what a parent, for example, was going through at that time. We can only do what we know to do at any given moment based on our circumstances. Now, that doesn't mean that you can condone certain behavior. I'm not saying, parents who drop their kids off in the river, or put them in the oven, or God forbid, whatever, like the crazies out there, right? I'm not condoning that. I'm just saying that at that moment, for that person, sane or not, it's the best thing that they could have done. And because we've never been in that person's shoes, and because we don't know what that life experience was like, it's very difficult for us to see how that would be the one thing that you would come up with. But if you could just imagine that whatever circumstances had led to that individual pursuing that action were circumstances that most human beings would have possibly pursued the same action, right? And in doing that and understanding that, at least theoretically, you can offer that person forgiveness. Not necessarily for what they did, but for who they were at that moment. Because the line that I love that he says is, if you're going to pursue revenge, dig yourself 2 graves. Another line that I love, and I heard a long, long time ago, is someone said, when we want revenge on someone, what we're usually doing is we drink the poison and we hope that the other person dies. Which doesn't make any sense at all, because if you're mad at someone, anyone, for example, Wayne was incredibly mad at his father. Did that affect his father's life in one bit? No. Wayne was the one that had to live with that pain, that anguish, the self-mutilation with alcohol and overeating and all that stuff. He was the one suffering, not his father. Most people that you're angry at or frustrated with, you being angry and frustrated makes zero difference in their lives. The only person suffering is you. And if that's the case, then the act of forgiving, again, not condoning the action, the act of forgiving and sending that person love releases you of that pain, releases you of that anguish. And that is something worth giving up. And that's what I love, right? He removed that pain. He removed that frustration and anger. And immediately after, within 14 days, wrote his first #1 bestseller. And that put him on the map. And he'll tell you time and time again that his greatest teacher in his life was his father. And maybe, just maybe, the things that people do to us and the people that they are just there to show us who we need to be, right? Because if Wayne didn't have, quote unquote, an asshole alcoholic father, he would have never had this experience. He would have never been the Wayne that we all know and love. So again, if there's anybody in your life right now or any situation in your life that you are angry at, that you have this revenge-fueled fury that you are pursuing, what I urge you to do is maybe just take a step back. Maybe just look at it with a whole new light and see how this situation was put in your path so that you can learn how to remove this boulder so that you can experience the other side. And maybe this person was sent down here to be an asshole to you in that specific situation. And they didn't necessarily want to be that. You know what? This reminds me, I'm going to read you guys a great story. It's called, I actually have the book right here. It's called The Little Soul and the Sun. It's by Neil Donald Walsh. He's the guy who did Conversations with God. If you haven't heard that or checked it out, unbelievable. But that's the book. And what I'll maybe do in one of these sessions is read, because it's a beautiful little parable about that, about how an angel chooses to come down and be a vicious person so that his best friend up there, his soulmate, actually has the experience of being able to forgive. Beautiful story. And then the one angel says to the other, "You would do that for me?" And he says, "Yeah, absolutely, I would do that for you." So again, maybe, just maybe, the people that you are really frustrated with or angry at actually chose in the most selfless way to come down here and be that for you so you could grow and develop and experience what it is that you came here to do. Just a thought. I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just saying if maybe this different perspective allows you to view the situation slightly differently, and that allows you to relieve some of that anger and frustration that is 100% holding you back, then maybe, just maybe, that's a worthwhile perspective. So again, thanks for every one of you for responding. If these have made any difference for you, please always email me, Ilan@SatoriPrime.com. I love getting these emails from you. And again, if you know someone who's going through this right now, who's holding on to anger, who's resentful, then please share this with them. This is a message. This is not my message. This is just a message, and I happen to be the vessel to deliver it. And if that makes a difference for anyone, then again, please share. And lastly, I just want to make you aware of a couple of things. My brother has finally published a couple of books actually on Amazon. First is The 7 Keys of Transformation. This is basically a resource guide for you unleashing your human potential. It's short, powerful, profound, and it's on Amazon right now. You can go grab it. It's just 99 cents to get onto your Kindle. And the second one, which is really a journey in a book of transformation. And that one's called Living for Mondays, a guide to living every day with passion, power, and grace. And that one is available on Amazon right now as well for just $5.49. So if you enjoy any of this kind of mindset stuff, I highly, highly recommend you go grab those books. Phenomenal resources to have you excel in the areas of life that matter most to you. And with that, I will say goodbye and have an amazing, amazing day. And we'll see you on the next Pep Talk.